Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to the first episode of the Synergy Talk Show. My name is Ibrahim Abouath. I'm joined by Terrence Marshall and Heaven Kamen. This is going to be a new show that we're running. As of now, we're basically looking to share with you an inside scoop of what's going on in the market and sharing every month what the market is saying so that you are educated and you know what's going on with the GTA market.
I think all of us get to see different things on the ground, and as buyers and sellers, maybe on the sidelines, maybe just thinking about entering the market, you might want to know what's happening with the market from our perspective, and so we thought we'd put this talk show together to give everyone that perspective.
Yeah, I feel like with the news and with the internet, they just kind of spew out numbers, but we're going to give you a more detailed breakdown of what's actually happening. So hopefully this gives you a lot more clarity.
Yeah, I hope so. And look, the reality is numbers say one thing, but what we actually see on the ground sometimes and the feedback we hear from sellers and buyers tell a different story. So, you can listen to the numbers or look into the numbers all you want, but sometimes that, anecdotal experience that you get from being an active agent is actually, what a lot of people probably don't know about. So that's what we're kind of trying to do with this Synergy Talk Show. Every month, we're going to be giving you a lot of value by discussing what's going on with the market from a statistics standpoint, but then also what we're seeing on a personal level as well.
All right, let's get into the stats.
Let's get into the stats.
Ibrahim?
So here's what you guys are here for. So 2024 housing market stats. Treb just released them yesterday. In December of 2024, there were, or actually I should say in all of 2024, the total annual sales last year was 67,610, which was actually up 2.6% compared to 2023.
Well,
Did you see that coming?
I saw that one coming. I think 2023 was a lot more dead. Rates were a lot more consistent, and we saw rates actually decrease in 2024. Buyer confidence was up, so transaction activity is up. That completely makes sense.
Yeah, I think even in 2023, that's when the rates were that's when the rates were kind of initially a little bit higher too, right? So I think a lot of buyers and sellers were kind of waiting on the sideline to see what was happening. But even near the end, before the rates were decreasing, we did see a lot more activity because people were used to the rates anyways, right? So
yeah, but look, I think sales numbers paint one picture or paint one side of the story. If you look at the new listings number, the total number of new listings in 2024 was 166,121.
I think that's one of the highest on record.
16.4% higher than 2023. That's a huge difference. That means sellers are actively looking to sell their homes. Yeah. But how has that translated into the average selling price? I don't know if you guys took a deeper look into the numbers, but do you think the average price was higher or lower last year compared to 2023?
I think it was probably just around the same.
What do you think?
I think it was a little bit higher.
A little bit higher. You guys are both very close. Actually, we were down by less than 1% last year. So in 2024, the average selling price...
Look at Ibrahim quizzing us on the market. he read it beforehand, and now he's asking us.
I guess I have the advantage of...
He has the iPad, so...
And ChatGPT.
But in 2024, the average selling price was $1,117,600. Okay, in 2023, that was just about $9,000 more, 1.126. So not a big difference.
In 2023, it was $9,000 less. You mean?
No, $9,000 more.
Oh, so it was higher in 2023.
So
2024, in 2023, the prices were higher than 2024. There was a decline of less than 1%, about $9,000. Yes, there was a decline. Okay. Now let's before we jump into like greater market trends, I'm just going to shoot out the December trends also. So if you guys have been following our newsletters, then we send out the monthly numbers every single month, and the trend that we saw from basically August, or I would say even July until November, was that the prices were relatively stable, up, down, but what we started to see was a big difference in one thing. What was that?
Activity.
Exactly. So do you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
So I think what's happening in the market in terms of activity, and when we're talking about transaction numbers, this means the amount of times a buyer and seller get together and a house switches hands. So there's a lot more of that going on because buyers are a lot more confident now with the lower rates. Their purchasing power has increased a bit, but more so I think just their confidence is what drives the buyers more towards the market. Now, from what we just said, there was a lot more listings in 2024. So when you have a lot more listings still on the market and yes, you have increased buyer confidence, you'll have more activity because buyers have a lot more to pick from. But because they also have a lot more to pick from, they're not overbidding or they're not outbidding to get into a home, right? They can be more picky. They can definitely be more picky, right, Ibrahim? You know that.
I know that very well.
Right? So with that comes obviously increased transaction numbers, but we're not seeing prices get out of hand. And I think we have to also remember, right? Prices are indicative of people's purchasing power. 2022, 2021, when things were crazy, rates were super low. Purchasing power was as high as it's ever been. And so we're not getting there, or we will never get there. Rates are slowly coming down. People are starting to buy again.
Yeah, I think if we go back to 2021 when the market was crazy, it kind of goes down to supply and demand, right? Back when we had less inventory, it was about almost 10 families bidding on one house. So people are going to start throwing money at the one house that's for sale, versus now buyers have the option to pick from different homes. If the price doesn't make sense, they're just going to go to the next property, right? So I think that's why the prices are pretty more stable.
To look deeper into that, right? Like, while rates have come down, so we had 4 or 5 straight decreases of interest rates, something like that, right? I think 1.25% total, or something like that. It's escaping me right now. So that's one part of the puzzle where, rates have come down, but like Terrence said, affordability is still not there for a lot of Canadians. While a lot of Canadians do have dreams of home ownership, while they want to own a house or a condo, whatever the case is, simply the fact is they're priced out of the market. They're still priced out of the market. And I think that's a big barrier that a lot of people don't talk about.
Yeah.
I read one thing pretty crazy, astonishing fact. For the average income in Toronto, or in the Toronto area, for somebody that wants to buy a house, the average house in Toronto with the average Canadian income, they would have to save for 29 years before they're able to afford a down payment.
Yeah, and we're talking about the down payment. Yeah,
the down payment. Right?
I think while we also talk about that, let's not. Transaction activity has increased significantly, but let's also say that that's more so in the freehold market, right? Condos are getting a beating right now, mostly because investors hold on to condos. And when condos are negative cash flow, because interest rates have come down, but they're still not at the point where condos make sense as an investment.
Yeah.
And with rents softening, investors are even more negative cash flow now as we enter into the winter. They're caught holding what isn't a good investment. So more of them are opting to sell. We have an increased amount of supply. I don't think we've ever seen this many condos for sale on the Toronto Real Estate Board.
Yeah.
It's actually the highest inventory we had in over 10 years.
Guys, let's put a pin over there for a second, because we're going to come to the difference in the condo and the freehold market. But let's just dive a little bit deeper into the December stats, and then we'll get into segment-specific statistics, right?
Sounds good.
So in December, we saw the trend continue where sales numbers were higher. Were higher than the month before, but they're actually lower compared to December 2023, which was interesting. So this holiday season, there were fewer sales, only 3,359 compared to December of 2023, which I found interesting because we had 4 straight months of activity increasing year over year, and then we finally had a little bit of a decline in December. So that's interesting. I wonder if that has to do with just, the holidays being around the corner, or if it has to do with all the economic, economic things that are going on around the world with the U.S. and the Canada and election and things like that. So I do think there's probably a little bit of uncertainty out there in the economy and in the market from the perspective of a buyer. What do you think?
I think definitely that might be the case. Exactly how many sales are we talking was the decrease?
I don't have the exact numbers right here, unfortunately.
It was about 1,000 less sales?
Something, 1,000, 1,500. It was just slightly down, less than 2%, so not a big
deal. I think, in general, December tends to be a time where there's decreased sales, decreased activity. December 2023, I remember I had a couple transactions last year, and those were people who thought, this is an opportune time to get into the market. I think people thought last year, December, they thought this is the bottom. Yeah. And so there might have been a lot more sales at that time. This is all speculation. Buyer activity, for the most part, usually moves in groves. But I definitely think this December, I felt people were more like, I want to spend time with my family, whatever the case may be. They didn't decide to actually come out and buy in December.
It's pretty crazy because if you look at the annual average price, it was 1.17, okay, in 2024. But the average price in December of 2024 was 1,067,000.
There you go.
There's a big difference there. So for the people that did take opportunity last month, they probably saved a decent amount of money, right?
Yeah, and that's funny. Like I didn't even see that number, but I can tell you the buyers I was working with last December 2023, they thought that this was the bottom. This is an opportunistic time, and obviously the average sales price indicates that. So that's good. I mean, people took advantage of the market last December, and people in history have said, oh, December is the time to get a good deal because most buyers are not out. So, there's a whole seasonality and speculation.
I'm a pretty big firm believer of that, though, that December is a good time. But, what do you think, Heaven, now that, we've gone over the trends over the last 5 months or so, it's been relatively stable. Would you agree?
I agree.
It's been relatively stable. Yeah. How do you see 2025 changing things?
I think there's going to be more buyers coming back out because even this January so far, what are we on? I think we're on the 9th right now.
8th.
The 8th. We're around the 8th right now. And I've already had so many conversations regarding real estate. And I'm getting a lot of inbound calls. So a lot of people, I think people are just kind of like sitting back and tracking the market and they're not seeing a lot of price increases, right? So the market has been pretty stable. So I think the buyers know what they want now, and I feel like they're going to slowly start coming out, but I feel like they're all going to come out at the same time, and I feel like we're going to have a strong spring market.
You know what? Like Terrence and I were talking about this a few weeks ago. I think I actually kind of disagree with that. So I'm going to let Terrence elaborate on this, but like one of the things that I kept hearing spewed by a lot of realtors was, wait till the spring, list in the spring,
this guy
list
took
in
my
the
line.
spring.
I told him that.
Yeah, no. To be fair, we had this discussion and, Terrence mentioned this and, I agree with him wholeheartedly, which is why I'm bringing it up today. But, a lot of people, including sellers and realtors, were saying, wait till the spring, the snow's going to melt, the weather's going to get warmer, and, it's a good time to sell your house, the spring market.
Yeah. That's your traditional language.
That's your traditional language. But why do you think that's actually bad advice?
Because that's when everybody's planning to sell. So when there's more listings, you have more competition. And mind you, if your home is tip top, like the best home on the street, you probably won't have a problem selling it. But just traditionally, when there's less inventory and there's more buyers and your home stands out, you tend to get a better price because people are willing to pay more for your home because it's more of one of the few, versus if there's a lot of competition, people can just hop back and forth between exactly which home they want. And so I found traditionally that January and February tends to do better for sellers because that notion of let's wait till the spring, most people will wait till the spring. The few that sell or list in January, February take advantage of the buyers who just come out of Christmas. They got money, they're done their holiday shopping, and they're thinking, I want to buy a new home in 2025. And so those buyers are now competing with fewer homes in January and February. So I tend to find the sellers in January and February do better than the sellers in March and April. And if I remember correctly, that's what happened last year too.
That's exactly what happened last year. So everybody was waiting until, the spring to list, waiting for the interest rates to drop last year, early last year, and at the same time waiting for the spring market to come. But then we had, I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but the inventory levels were insane around April, May of last year.
Yeah, literally because you said everybody was waiting for the rates to drop, so everybody started listing it. And
then at the same time, the government announced the capital gains, increase in capital gains, and that triggered a lot of inventory. So,
And by the way, the capital gains was fully scrapped as of last week.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because they prorogued Parliament. That bill didn't get royal assent, so it's done. It's not happening. So anyone who sold their home, but I didn't think that a lot of that activity was driven by that, because to be honest with you, there may have been a couple people, unless you're sitting on a fat capital gain and you're like, this is going to make a massive difference, right? It usually typically doesn't motivate most people. I didn't think it did. But what I will say is that in the spring, when that increased inventory happened, it could be for a number of reasons, right? Like we have mortgage renewals happening, right? So people deciding, okay, you know what? even me renewing, and rates didn't come down, right? So they were just starting to trickle, and people thought one rate drop, two rate drop, everyone's gonna come running. No, that didn't happen at all. And so people were thinking, all the sellers that were like, oh, I've been holding on like for dear life, and this is my time, didn't see that result come in, right? So I don't think we're at a point still where rates are rates
so
have
I have
dropped
some crazy things to mention just to tackle your point, your last point about January and February. So in 2025, 50, and this is courtesy of Austin. I got to give him a shout out. He's always sending really good statistics and newsletters, keeping us educated. 57% more mortgage renewals are due in 2025 compared to before. Currently, there's going to be more than 50% of mortgages will be up for renewal between 2025 and 2026. In 2025, there's 57% more compared to 2024. And take this in, this is the craziest one. At least 85% of the mortgages renewing this year were secured when the Bank of Canada's interest rate was at or below 1%.
Oh, so a lot of people are going to take a really big hit.
So there's going to be a lot of interesting action in the market this year, which is why I think it's crucial, like Terrence said, if you're a seller, to list now rather than list in the spring.
Yeah.
Why are you waiting? I mean, what are you waiting for, right? Like, the thing is that if you know you have a renewal coming up, I don't know if people are trying to time the renewal to lessen their penalty or whatever the case may be, but if you're renewing from when the Bank of Canada was under 1 to now being high 3, you're still going to be in for a payment shock. Meaning your payment's going to skyrocket. And if you can already pre-plan and understand what your budget is, understand, okay, this is what my income is, this is what payment I can afford, this new payment, get your renewal options early, figure out what your payments look like, get ahead of the other sellers, and list your home early so maybe you can extract the largest amount of equity from your home and move on and downsize to something you can afford at these newer rates would be the strategy, I think, if you're a smart seller, if you're a proactive seller. But if you wait for when everybody else is knowing that mortgage renewals are 57% higher this year, you're probably going to be competing against everyone. And if you get into a situation where you can't afford your payment and then you become a desperate seller, well, that never bodes well.
Yeah.
Because I also feel like a lot of people are holding on for dear life and they're waiting for something crazy to happen in the market. So every single month that you're taking that hit, you're gonna become more and more of a desperate seller. So when it's time to come to the negotiation table, you don't want to be the seller that needs to sell because you're gonna take a lowball offer, right? Yeah. So
you want to be the seller that obviously is motivated to sell, but that has the luxury of sort of being in a position where they can turn down offers, right? That don't meet their standards or meet their needs.
It goes back to the traditional saying, right? Like when you're selling, the best way to sell your asset for the highest price is when you don't need to sell, right?
Exactly. I think one more thing we want to just touch on, I don't have the exact statistics in front of me, but speaking to our resident rental expert, what are you seeing in the rental market right now?
So since January started, the rental market has been picking up like crazy. So around the November, December time, that it's the traditional time.
Tenants or for landlords? Like rental market's picking up like crazy for tenants or for landlords? Like, are you working more with tenants or are you
so it's basically going to be the same market, right? So in terms of on the landlord side, right now to list your property is the best time because I have 4 active clients right now and multiple bidding situations on all of them. Again,
interesting.
Literally as of January 1st.
That's funny, just to pause there, because the rental market was actually down over the last maybe quarter. Right?
Yeah, so rents have actually last year in 2023, rents have gone up. I've seen it on average about $300 on average. They've gone up in 2023. So around
2024?
No, in 2023.
Okay.
In 2024 summer, they've started to come down.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's basically
that makes sense with the data, because they were saying in 2024 rents have started to soften. More recently, we've seen rents soften. Landlords are having some trouble actually filling their vacancies. And interestingly enough, I've even seen advice as far as ask your landlord to maybe discount the rent, because I'm seeing a similar apartment go for 2,200 and I'm paying 2,350 right now. And that's specifically for the condo market, right? In the condo market, you have some serious leverage right now. But freeholds are a different story, maybe. Even those I've heard have softened a bit. So what have you seen in terms of like rent amounts? Like, are they going up or down? And are landlords or tenants, who's faring better? Who's this situation better for?
So I'll start off around November, December-ish. Landlords were struggling. Landlords were super desperate. Almost every single listing had a price change. You can see it's like $100 or a $200 slash just to get the unit rented out.
And let's be specific. Was that for freehold properties or for condo properties or for both?
Freeholds, I find that freeholds always have demand. It's usually the condominiums are the ones that have the price fluctuations right away, right? But yeah, December time I've been seeing a lot of price slashes, and any single offer I've put in December, I got accepted right away. Yeah. And the ball was in our court. It didn't matter what the move-in date was. Anything we wanted, we got.
And because of seasonality too, right?
Yeah.
Because people don't want to move in December.
Exactly.
That's the reality. That's the reality.
Yeah. But the second January started, I've had 3 offers that I put in.
That's usually pretty common though. January and September are major, motivators for tenants.
Yeah.
To find a property, right?
To find New Year's resolution. I want a new place this year.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But overall, I think we're seeing the rental market trend in a positive direction.
In a positive
Is that
direction.
What you're seeing?
Yeah. That's what I'm seeing.
Awesome.
If you're a tenant right now, you gotta have all your ducks in order and come see me.
Amazing. So let's actually use that. We talked a little bit about condos. Let's segue into the condo market right now. Mm-hmm. What are we seeing in the condo market right now? It's not pretty, and I don't know if it's going to get pretty anytime in the near future.
I don't think it is. Let's talk about let's go in order. Pre-con sales.
So I have a few numbers. Okay, the total number of sales in 2020.
5,000.
Throughout the year to date, 2024, 18,698.
Okay, 18,000.
Yes.
Okay, that's more than I would have ever thought.
The total number of sales were down by 2.4%. The average price was down by 2.1%.
And let's just say that it's down from a year that was already terrible. Like 2023 was an absolutely horrific year for pre-construction sales. So for it to be down from that is even worse. Means that the future supply of condos are going to definitely be decreased. I think condos, it's really tough situation right now because nobody wants to buy them. Nobody wants to hold them. They're negative cash flow for the foreseeable future. I mean, until rates get to a point where they start to make sense. But I don't think right now for the foreseeable future, condos pricing is not getting better. Pre-construction sales are not getting better. Resale is not getting better either.
The condo market was traditionally propped up by investors, right?
It always has.
It was traditionally propped up by investors. The investors are gone now. So it's no longer a good investment. Like you said, positive cash flow is a thing of the past. I don't think you'll ever find positive cash flow, not in the GTA. It's just impossible. I would be confident
people can't afford the rents.
I would be confident in saying it's impossible. Yeah. So as an investment, I think it's out of the picture. But for people that are maybe looking to move into condos as a primary residence, what do you guys think? What do you guys think about that? Prices may decline further, as you said, but do you think it's still the right time to get into a condo now?
Honestly, I feel like if you're going to be moving into a condo, you have to stay in there for at least 5 to 7 years.
Yes.
Like you have to think of
I think that's great advice. The reason being is because if you can move, right now is a great time to move into a condo if you can afford it and you can buy it and you can afford the monthly payments because you've got insane negotiating power. You can negotiate the price you want. You don't have to feel any pressure. You can choose the best one that you like, that looks the best. Move into it. It's close to work. Your quality of life increases. Your commute time decreases. If all those things and the stars align, buy it. Why? Because in 5 to 7 years, all of the condos that typically would have been built from the pre-construction sales that should have taken place the year before and the year before that are not going to come online. So in 5 to 7 years, if the math plays out, there should actually be a supply shortage of condos on the resale market because there's going to be much less new supply coming onto the market. So you might be in a good position where you can buy the dream condo you want, right? Not dream home, but the dream condo you want for a price you want, hold it for 5 to 7 years, pay down some equity, and then in 5 to 7 years, when the supply is short again, you might be able to sell for a much better price at that time and possibly upsize. So if you're family planning or things work out for your timeline, I think it's a good decision.
No, I agree 100%. And like one of the things is there's scheduled to be, I think, 30,000 new units coming on the market this year, something like that. So inventory is going to increase. So I think 2024 is still going to be a bad year for an investor. But for the person that's looking to buy a house or buy a condo to live in, get into something, but keep a 4, 5, 6, 7 year plan like Terrence mentioned, and you should be all right. Remember, like I know we say this all the time, but it's not about timing the market, it's about time in the market, right? Yeah. So as any type of real estate investment over a 5, 6, 7 year period, you're going to do well, right? You're going to do well. You're going to do well. Do you have any last thoughts to make about condos or about the market in general? Any last thoughts from anyone?
Any last thoughts?
No, I think mostly we've covered everything, right? Pre-con to resale. It's a falling knife, right?
It is. I guess one last thing you might want to touch on, because I am getting a lot of calls right now about people that purchased pre-con in 2019, 2020 that's coming live on the market this year. So
that's a tough
one. What type of advice would you give to, pre-construction buyers that are coming up to closing?
I think if you've purchased a pre-construction condo or investment in general, and you have a serious gap between what you purchased and what it's worth today, I think there's a couple of conversations you need to have. The first one is, does it make sense for you to close this condo, right? So there might be a situation, obviously you're gonna have to talk to your lawyer about this, but from a legal standpoint, does walking away make sense, right? Losing your deposit and instead of closing, putting up more capital, your land transfer tax, your closing costs, and then your carrying costs, does that make sense for you? Or depending on your financial situation, can you afford to walk away from the deposit and just cut your losses? And then remember, even if you lose $150,000 deposit, you can count that as a capital loss on your tax return. And in the future, you can set that loss against any future gains. So maybe you have some gains in the stock market. Maybe you offset those against each other and then come out a little less scathed. Yeah. Otherwise,
just one thing, couple things I want to point out.
You can get sued.
Yes, obviously.
That's why I say see a lawyer.
If you, just so you guys know, if you walk away from your purchase, it doesn't mean you walk away from your obligations. No. You signed a contract, you're obligated to close according to the terms of that contract on the closing date that the builder schedules. You can, however, negotiate a walk away with the builder directly. Speak to your lawyer about that. But simply just walking away doesn't mean you're only going to lose your deposit. Absolutely. You're opening yourself up to be sued for damages.
You are.
Just wanted to make that point. The second thing is, I wanted to ask you, you made a really good point. Like if you do walk away and you take $100,000 capital loss, how many years can I push that forward?
Indefinitely.
That's what I wanted people
and
to know.
3 years back. So if you had some gains in the last 3 years and you take that loss this year, that loss would obviously come as soon as the completion date comes and you don't close. You can set that loss against your gains. And again, like exactly what Ibrahim said, you can get sued, but if you can work out the numbers, right? Like chances are if that property's worth 1.5 million, for example, and you purchased it for 1.65 million and you put $150,000 deposit, right? Basically, the difference in the appraisal value and what you purchased it for is your deposit. So if you walk away from that, knowing that the payments are insane, knowing that you're not going to be able to afford this, that deposit is going to cover most of the builder's loss because they could sell it at today's price, and arguably they probably wouldn't sue you. But again, speak to your lawyer, determine and understand that situation to see if walking away is a viable, reasonable option. You don't want to walk away knowing you're going to be sued, right? Because if the difference is much larger, then you'll probably get sued. And if you own assets, then...
The reality is builders have gone after purchasers and they have won. They have won many times.
They're contracts at the end of the day.
And it's considered a breach of contract.
Exactly.
Any other last points that you want to make about pre-construction? Do you have anything to mention, Evan?
Yeah, no, I think it's just even with the a lot of investors at the time that they purchased, they bought with the intent of assigning. Assigning is it's next to impossible right now. They have a bunch of Facebook, even on Facebook, they have a bunch of these groups that are just filled with assignment sales. And if you guys want to buy an assignment, you can get some really good deals right now with people walking away from their deposit. But even then, price wise, the prices you're still paying for, even if they're walking away from the deposit, it's still above market value. So resale is where you want to go if you want to.
The reality is a lot of builders sold properties with prices with 4, 5, 6 years of appreciation baked into the price.
That's right.
And now that even if you walk away from your deposit, you're not going to be at the market value of the home, right? If you purchase it at that price. So I just think the assignment market is dead right now, and it's a tough situation for a lot of people that have condos that are coming up for closing. For a lot of people, I'm saying the same thing that Terrence said. Try to walk away, speak to the builder, see if you can just lose your deposit or walk away. Or worst case scenario, try to close on it and you have to just hold it, right? Like, or try to sell it at a loss.
And that's the legal standpoint. The second point we should bring up is if it makes sense to close and you can close it. Maybe you can afford the payments, but you can't cover the difference in appraisal, right? In that case, you just need really somebody who can really work out your financing for you. And I would say you can reach out to us. We can put you in touch with a mortgage broker that's very skilled in terms of like helping you out with maybe bridging that gap, or qualifying for the mortgage, getting the best rate, all that stuff. So legal, finance, and then I think I covered the tax portion on if you take a loss, right? Like what that results in. Is there anything else, Evan?
Yeah, I think your first line of defense would be to just speak with your lawyer just to make sure that if you are going with the direction of closing, you can actually afford it, because now you got to think about occupancy fees. Do you have the right to put a tenant in there if it's under occupancy? I've seen some of these condos. Okay, I don't want to put any condos out there, but there's some condos that are charging like $3,500 or close to $4,000 for like a 2-bed, 2-bath condo for an occupancy fee, right?
It could get pretty high. So obviously always speak to your lawyer. We're just running out of time here, so I guess we'll just wrap it up here before we get to the last segment of our show. Any last thoughts about condos or anything like that? No. Awesome. So for the last segment of our show, we're going to be making this a staple of the Synergy Talk Show. Terrence and I are going to end off with some advice for both buyers and sellers for the month that we're currently in. So for the month of January 2025, what should sellers do?
I think sellers should hire a knowledgeable, competent realtor that understands the market and understands what it's going to take to get their home sold. And that sounds very cliche, but let me go into a little bit of specifics with that. Buyers have a lot of choice right now. So how is your realtor going to make your home stand out, right? How are they going to market it? How are they going to present it? Are they willing to put up money to help you renovate it? Because look, like we've renovated, I think 3 out of the 4 last listings we had, because we were confident that if we didn't do what was needed to get these homes up to top shape, they were not going to sell. And yes, it took 6 to 8 weeks of work, some custom kitchens, some tiling, all that stuff needed to be done. But once they hit the market, they sold within 3 to 7 days. So that tells you a story. Buyers are not willing to stretch their budget, but in this market, they are willing to pay maybe even a slight premium for a home that checks off all the boxes and doesn't need any work done. So as a seller, make sure your home stands out.
And just one more thing, like we said earlier, list now rather than listing in the spring.
Yeah, so just going back to that, buyers would be willing to pay a little bit more of a premium on a home that has all the features that they wanted from the get-go, right? Because instead of having to put that money up themselves, they'd rather finance that into their mortgage, right? So they can squeeze in the extra 10 grand or the extra 20 grand into their payments, because that's the perfect home, right? And as realtors, our job is to net you the most amount of money. So we'll do a full assessment on your property to see what kind of strategic renovations we can do to get you that top dollar.
Yeah. I think the key takeaway from here is 2 things. 1, list now rather than list in the spring. That's our advice. And number 2, do what you can to make your home stand out. And if that means working with an experienced team that can manage the renovation so that you don't have to, then seriously consider that. The next thing I want to mention is, what does all of this mean for buyers? What do based on the stats that we're seeing, what does this mean for buyers? And what I would tell buyers right now is the following. Work with an experienced real estate agent that can negotiate the best deal possible for you. Right now, we're in a market where it's advantageous for the buyer over the seller. So you have to do what you can to get a further advantage, right? There's a lot more homes available for sale, not a lot of buyers. You have more leverage when it comes to negotiations. But obviously, you're not negotiating the deal yourself. So it's important that you work with an agent that's experienced.
And represents your interests.
Represents your interests and has the track record of success, right? So make sure whoever you're working with has that track record so that they can get you the best deal possible. And finally, just don't be afraid to put in any conditions. Always protect yourself, whether that's financing, home inspection.
Especially in this market. I don't think anyone needs to drop all their conditions and go firm in this market. Like if you're strategic enough and you represent what you're bringing to the table properly, and represent your buyer well and your agent is professional, if I'm on the listing side, I would take that offer, right? I think just sometimes I'll take an offer from an agent that sounds like they know what they're doing versus someone that doesn't. And take in that I don't know either buyer, right? It's just a representation from their agent.
Yeah, even from the listing side, when we see agents that are known in the industry and they have the track record, you're more confident in that agent to get that deal done, right? So that goes a long way too.
Yeah.
Right?
So just the key takeaway, like I said, for the sellers, the key takeaway for buyers right now is work with an experienced agent and don't be afraid to include conditions to protect yourself, and don't be as aggressive as you normally would be.
Yeah, I don't think you need to be. I know there's some markets, Durham region specifically, there are multiple offers going on, but also consider this, right? There are a lot of buyers that can't afford to do the renovations like Kevin said. So they're willing to multiple offer on those homes, just like the one I had in Oshawa. We had 30 families walk through in 3 days because of how it looked and it was fully renovated. Didn't need any work. So more people want that. If there are homes sitting on the market and you've got extra cash over and above your down payment, consider buying that home, negotiating the price as hard as you can, and if you feel like you can take on the renovations post-closing to customize it to the way you'd like it, then not only are you going to get a better deal, but you'll also have some equity once you're all done.
And you know what, just to add to that last point, that's an excellent piece of advice. And if you have any type of plan to add a secondary or tertiary unit to your property, there are new programs available that allow you to get financing up to 90% to add those units to your home, right? So if you want more details about that, you can reach out to us. Any last thoughts that we want to share?
I would, just to add to your point, if you're a buyer and you think that adding a secondary unit could help offset some of your mortgage payments, sometimes known as house hacking, that would definitely be a good option in today's market. Just, I would say, seek an architect to make sure that that home that you're purchasing is well laid out to be able to accommodate a second unit.
Absolutely. That's great advice. With that being said, we're going to wrap up here. Thank you so much for tuning in to our first episode of the Synergy Talk Show. We hope you found a lot of value from this show, and we can't wait to see you next month.